So many players hit their bandeja, but it just comes off the racket, bounces high off the glass, and then they get killed. So many players really struggle with keeping the ball low off their bandeja at the other end of the court. The problem is if you hit a ball that is bouncing and it comes high off the glass, you can get attacked and you don't have time to get back up that net. So in this video, we're going to talk about some common errors for why you are hitting the ball so bouncy, and secondly, how you can fix it and how you can keep your bandeja nice and low at the other end. So we've identified 4 main areas that players really struggle with when it comes to bouncy bandejas, and that is contacting behind them. So they're moving back and they're contacting their bandeja behind them, and therefore the racket face is open, the angle of the racket face is open, so the ball will be bouncier at the other end. The second is the contact being too high. They get in quite a nice position, they should be contacting at forehead level or eye level, but they end up contacting too high, and therefore the contact point is high, so the bounce is high, but also the angle of the racket face again is a little bit flat. The third is that players are hitting too hard with this shot. The point of the shot is to recover your net position, to give you time to get back up, but also if you hit too hard, it will be a faster rebound at the other end of the court. And then the fourth one, and probably the most common, is the path of the racket. So you get in this position and instead of having your arm up like this, players have their bent elbow like this and they go up to the ball, and therefore the path of the racket head is going up to meet the ball, and therefore that ball will go up instead of having the path coming from high and going lower, coming down the back of the ball. And those are the 4 common errors when it comes to having a really bouncy bandeja. So we've identified those are the main 4 errors when it comes to having a bouncy bandeja. If you can identify which of those you are doing, because more than likely it's going to be one of those 4. There might be the odd other exception, but mostly you will be doing one of those 4. And now we're going to talk about how you can tackle that, how you can actually improve that. So to begin with, if you move back, exaggerated move back behind the ball, it will solve more than one of those. For example, when that lob goes up, if you move back really fast to get right behind the ball, and then end up contacting in front, and maybe you even are reaching forward for this, which is absolutely fine, it will solve a couple of problems. First of all, it will mean that you're not going to contact behind because you're reaching out in front of you. It also will probably mean that it's going to be easier for you to contact at eye level or forehead level. And it also, aside from the bouncy part, it will also make it easier for you to recover your net. So when you're practicing your bandeja, exaggerate this movement, get yourself further back than you need to be, and remember that if you get yourself too far back, you can always take a step forward again. But if you don't get yourself far enough back, then for you to step away at the end will mean that you're going to be off balance and you're falling away from, the net position that you want to retain after the shot. And so the other thing to exaggerate when you're doing this is to exaggerate this arm being up like this. And this will probably require video feedback, because I've had lots of students where they say to me their arm is up, and then I end up videoing them, and then you can actually clearly see where the elbow is, because players often think, yeah, I get my arm up, I'm in this position, and then they end up being in a position like this. So I highly recommend videoing some of your bandejas. Now, if you're on the Padel School Plus community, please put them in our community, because our coaches there are really happy to give you feedback on some of your bandejas. But video it yourself, have a look at it, and then you can see where your elbow is, because that is one of the most important things. And just get used to having that arm up into this position here when you go and hit your bandeja. And that way you will make sure that you go from high to low. Now, what I often get from players that when we talk about this is they say, but there are lots of players that start with a bent elbow. And if we use someone like Alejandra Salazar, for example, she will go back with the elbow bent like this, but then on her shot, she will go like this and open the arm up into that position. Now, I highly recommend to begin with going into that fully stretched position first, and then you can always adapt it later. But you want to make sure that you get into that position on the take back for your bandeja. So a really good way to do this is to practice for yourself. Grab a basket of balls and throw the ball up and give yourself targets at the other end. So you can see at this end, we've put a bench, and the idea is to hit under the seat part of the bench, but you can put a tape down on the glass as long as you've got a visual target that you can aim for and try and keep the ball lower than, then that will be good practice for you with your bandejas. A bonus tip for keeping your bandeja low at the other end is to make sure that you really go through the ball, because often players get into a good position and they're worried about too much bounce, and so they stop the racket to try and make it not bounce too much and not give it too much speed. But then what ends up happening is the racket face ends up flattening and it becomes a flatter contact, as opposed to being open and going through that ball with a little bit of slice, therefore keeping it low at the other end. And this is a real confidence shot. So this is great to practice in your social games. Whenever you've got a ball and you feel like, right, I'm going to keep this low and keep it kind of down for my opponent at the other end, this is a great way to do that. So maybe what you want to say is go into your next match, your next social game, and say all of the overheads that I'm going to hit, even if I could hit a more aggressive one, I'm going to try and hit this control bandeja with really low and soft at the other end, trying to keep that second bounce not bouncing too far off those back glass or that double glass. Now on this side, I'm going to put a video about the basics, you know, the 101 of a bandeja and what you should be doing if you're starting from scratch.